That's exactly what Sarah said when she pulled down an old, dusty box from her grandmother's attic, a box that had been sealed for decades. But inside, a mysterious collection of letters, some yellowed with age, others with a distinct stamp that looked almost too familiar. What caught Sarah's attention the most was one simple detail. One of those letters had a stamp dating back to a time when her cousin, Emily, had mysteriously disappeared. It all started as a simple spring cleaning project. Sarah had just moved into her grandmother's old house, a place she hadn't stepped foot in since her childhood. Like many of us, she thought she was just going through the motions, dusting off old furniture, organizing a few forgotten family heirlooms, but she could have never imagined the astonishing discovery that would soon turn her life upside down. The attic was a treasure trove of memories, filled with old books, photographs, and family relics. But buried underneath all of that, hidden from the world for years, was a box of letters, a box that held the key to an unsolved family mystery. And when Sarah found that box, she thought it was just going to be another trip down memory lane, a glimpse into a past she only vaguely remembered. But one of the stamps on those letters stopped her dead in her tracks. This wasn't just a simple relic from the past. This was a stamp with a date that no one could forget, one that marked the disappearance of her cousin Emily. Emily had gone missing over 20 years ago, and despite countless searches, news reports, and endless searching, no one had ever found a trace of her. The case had gone cold. There were no leads. The family was left with questions and heartbreak, but no answers. What could this stamp mean? Why was it on a letter that had been forgotten in a box in an attic? How could it possibly connect to Emily, a cousin Sarah had been incredibly close to before she vanished? As Sarah flipped through the stack of letters, she found one that was postmarked from the exact time Emily disappeared. But the letter wasn't addressed to Sarah. It was addressed to someone named Margaret, a name Sarah didn't recognize. The letter was dated a few days before Emily's disappearance. So, what was this letter doing in her grandmother's attic, and why had it been hidden away for so long? Was this a clue? A message from Emily herself? Or was it just a coincidence that the dates matched? I know you're sitting there wondering the same thing Sarah was. What is going on? What is the story behind these letters, and how do they connect to Emily's disappearance? Well, you're in the right place. Stick with me because by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what happened. You're going to get the answers to the mystery that's been hanging over this family for decades. Trust me, you won't believe how this story unfolds. But here's the thing. You won't get all the answers yet, not until we uncover more, piece by piece, together. So, keep watching. I want you to take a moment and imagine what it must have been like for Sarah. You've probably been in a situation where you stumbled across something you weren't supposed to find, something that started to unravel a truth you weren't ready to face. Well, that's exactly what Sarah was about to experience. It wasn't just a random series of letters, it was a message from the past, one that was deliberately hidden away for reasons Sarah hadn't yet uncovered. And the deeper she dug, the more questions kept piling up. It's human nature to seek answers, right? We want to understand why things happen. We crave closure, especially when something mysterious or tragic happens, like the disappearance of a loved one. In this case, Sarah was no different. She needed to know why Emily disappeared, and now it seemed that the answers might be hidden in these letters, buried in an attic, waiting for her to find them. But here's the thing. As Sarah began reading through the letters, something strange happened. The handwriting on the letters wasn't familiar to her at all. It wasn't even familiar to her grandmother, who had lived in the house for years. And as Sarah read more, she started to feel a growing sense of unease. Some of the letters seemed to suggest that Emily's disappearance wasn't a random event. The more she read, the more she realized that this wasn't just a missing person case. This was something much, much darker. The letters spoke of secrets, hidden relationships, and a network of people who, at first glance, didn't seem to have anything to do with Emily. And yet, they were intricately woven into the fabric of her disappearance. But here's the kicker, one of the letters, the most important one, was from someone named Margaret. But who was Margaret? Was she involved in Emily's disappearance? Or was she just a part of something much bigger that Sarah had yet to uncover? By now, I know you're dying to know what happens next. But I'm not going to give it all away just yet. You need to stick around for this, because the next part of the story is going to blow your mind. I promise you, it will. Imagine this. Sarah was alone, standing in the attic, reading through these letters, when she uncovered something that made her blood run cold. Hidden inside the very last letter was a piece of paper folded up tightly, a paper that contained a name. The name wasn't just some random name. It was a name from the past, a name that belonged to someone who had been missing from Sarah's life for years. Could this person be the key to Emily's disappearance? Was this another twist in the mystery? And if so, how deep did the rabbit hole go? You're probably asking yourself the same thing Sarah was. What did that name mean? What would it lead to? And most importantly, could it finally be the breakthrough Sarah needed to solve the mystery of her cousin's disappearance? I know you're hooked right now. I can feel it. You're as eager as Sarah was to know what happens next. And you're about to find out. But before we go any further, I want you to do something for me. Make sure you hit that like button if you want to see more of this story. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already part of our community of mystery lovers. Because believe me, what's coming next is something you won't want to miss. In the next part of this video, we'll dive deeper into these letters, uncover the hidden secrets behind the name Sarah discovered, and trace the trail of clues that could lead us to the truth behind Emily's disappearance. I'm telling you, this story is far from over. And trust me, you're going to want to see it through to the end. Stay with me, because the answers are just around the corner. Keep watching, because this mystery is about to take a turn you never saw coming. As Sarah stood there in the attic, staring at the last letter she had uncovered, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. The name written on the piece of folded paper was something she hadn't heard in years, Clara Benson. To most people, it would have seemed like just another name, but to Sarah, it was the name of someone she thought was lost to time. Clara Benson had been her childhood friend, someone who had vanished shortly after Emily's disappearance. But the oddest thing was that Sarah's family had never spoken about Clara since. In fact, they seemed to avoid the topic altogether. No one ever explained why. It was as if her name had been erased from memory, like she never existed. But now, there it was, in black ink, in a letter tied to Emily's disappearance. Why was it in the attic in the first place? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Roy finally spoke. You should stop looking. There's a lot more at stake here than you understand. Some things, some people, need to stay forgotten. His words hung in the air, cold and final. But Sarah wasn't going to be intimidated. Tell me what you know, Roy. I know you're hiding something. You've been hiding something for years. Don't act like you're some innocent bystander in this mess. If you know what happened to Emily, you have to tell me. But Roy's response was unsettling. His voice dropped to a whisper. The truth isn't always something you can handle, Sarah. Some stories aren't meant to be told. There's more to this family than you realize, and the deeper you dig, the more you're going to wish you hadn't. Trust me, you don't want to know everything. Before Sarah could ask him more questions, the line went dead. She stared at her phone, her mind racing. What had Roy meant by that? What was he trying to warn her about? And why had he sounded so desperate for her to stop digging? Something was off, and the feeling in the pit of her stomach told her that the walls were closing in. But Sarah wasn't ready to back off. She couldn't be. The disappearance of Emily had haunted her family for too long, and the answers were within reach. The pieces were there, even if they were scattered and hidden in the shadows. But with every step she took, it seemed like someone was determined to keep her from finding them. And she wasn't sure if it was her family, someone from her past, or someone entirely different who was trying to silence her. In the days that followed, things only got stranger. The more Sarah questioned people, the more she encountered resistance. At her local library, she tried to look up old records of Emily's disappearance, but the librarian, Mr. Peterson, the one who had been so eager to help her at first, acted strange. He grew visibly uncomfortable when she asked to see the records, offering vague excuses about them being unavailable. When Sarah pressed him further, he suddenly became evasive, his hands trembling as he fumbled through papers. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of fear, a flash of recognition, that made Sarah uneasy. Had he been involved in Emily's disappearance? Or was he simply hiding something else, something unrelated but still tied to the past. Later that same evening, Sarah received a package at her doorstep. No return address, just a plain, brown envelope. Inside, she found another letter, this one written in a different hand than the others. It was short, almost cryptic, but the message was clear: stop looking into Clara Benson. Some things are better left forgotten. You've been warned. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that whoever had sent the letter knew exactly what she was after. And worse, they were willing to go to great lengths to make sure she stopped digging. Someone was trying to stop her, but who? Was it someone she knew, someone close to her, or someone from her family's hidden past? Now, with the letter in hand, Sarah felt more alone than ever. Everyone she had trusted, everyone she thought she could turn to, seemed to be hiding something. Was Roy right? Was she in over her head? Was she risking everything to uncover a truth that no one was ready to hear? Or was she just being led down a dangerous path that would end in heartbreak and betrayal? The answers were closer than ever, but with every turn, Sarah felt more and more like she was being trapped in a web she couldn't escape from. The closer she got to the truth, the more it seemed like someone didn't want her to find it. And now, as she stared at the mysterious letter, Sarah realized something: she wasn't just looking for answers anymore. She was in a race against time, against a shadowy figure who was determined to keep the past buried. She couldn't stop now. But with every answer she uncovered, Sarah realized that the stakes were getting higher. The question was no longer just about finding Emily, it was about surviving the truth. And the deeper Sarah dug, the more she realized, the real mystery wasn't just Emily's disappearance. It was everything that had been hidden in the dark corners of her family's past. What would Sarah uncover next? Keep watching, because the next twist is just around the corner. The tension in Sarah's life had reached a boiling point, and yet, the deeper she ventured into the mystery of Emily's disappearance, the more she felt like she was losing her grip on reality. Every corner she turned revealed more unanswered questions, more unsettling gaps in the story she'd been told her entire life. But just when she thought she was inching closer to the truth, another disturbing twist arose, one that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew. It started when her cousin, Ava, reached out to her late one evening. Ava had always been a distant relative, someone Sarah didn't keep in close contact with, but the two of them shared a bond from childhood, back when their families used to be closer. Recently, Ava had been keeping a low profile, living in another state, but she called Sarah, clearly shaken. I don't know how to explain this, but I think I'm being followed, Ava said in a frantic voice, almost whispering through the phone. I don't know what's going on, but ever since I heard you were looking into Emily's disappearance, strange things have been happening. I keep seeing the same car parked outside my house. And today, I got a letter. It was just like the one you mentioned. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She remembered the warning she had received, the anonymous letter urging her to stop digging into Clara Benson and the past. Could it be that the same people who wanted to silence her were now threatening Ava as well? There was a deep sense of foreboding in Ava's voice that Sarah couldn't ignore. Ava, what did the letter say? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava hesitated before responding, clearly rattled by the thought of it. It was short. Just like yours, it said something like, "Stop looking. You're asking the wrong questions. The past is buried for a reason." But it wasn't just the letter that scared me. It was the fact that, right after I got it, I went outside and saw that same car parked down the street again. It's been there for days. Ava's voice faltered as she spoke, her fear palpable. Sarah's mind raced. What was happening? It was one thing for her to be threatened, but for Ava, someone who had stayed away from the mess of the family drama, to get caught up in it, this wasn't a coincidence. The noose was tightening around them both, and someone was clearly willing to go to extreme lengths to protect whatever secrets were buried in their family's past. Whoever was pulling the strings didn't just want Sarah to stop. They wanted to send a message. And now, they were targeting Ava as well. Ava, you need to be careful, Sarah warned, her voice filled with urgency. I don't know who's behind this, but it's not just about Emily. There's something much bigger going on, something we're not seeing. She could feel the weight of her words, the realization that this wasn't just a case of a missing person anymore, it was a conspiracy, one that reached far deeper than Sarah could have imagined. Who could she trust? The people closest to her seemed to be the ones hiding the most. Ava, who had been experiencing her own strange threats, was out of reach. She hadn't returned Sarah's calls since their last conversation. Roy, too, was evasive, his cryptic warnings ringing in her ears. Was he just trying to protect her, or was he involved in something darker? The fear that had been bubbling just beneath the surface began to overtake her as the evening approached. She tried to get some sleep, but it was impossible. Her mind raced, replaying every moment, every conversation, trying to connect the dots, but the more she tried, the more confusing and dangerous it all seemed. At one point, she thought she heard footsteps outside her bedroom window. Her heart pounded as she lay perfectly still, listening. Was it her imagination, or was someone out there, waiting for the right moment? Her breath was shallow as she tiptoed to the window, trying to peer out into the darkness. But when she looked, there was nothing, no shadow, no figure, just the empty street lit by the dim glow of the street lamp. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. She froze. Who could it be at this hour? Her heart thudded in her chest as she slowly approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. She hesitated for a moment, a deep sense of unease clawing at her, but she opened the door anyway. Standing on the other side was a man in his late 40s, a stranger to her. He wore a dark jacket and looked like he hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his expression strained. I know who you are," the man said in a hurried voice, his words almost stumbling over each other. "I know what you've been looking into. You need to stop. It's not safe for you anymore." Before Sarah could respond, he stepped closer, his hand shaking as he handed her an envelope, and then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night like a ghost. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, staring at the envelope in her hands. Her mind raced, but her instincts told her not to open it just yet. Something about the way the man had looked at her made her skin crawl, as if he knew something she didn't, something she wasn't supposed to know. With trembling fingers, she closed the door and locked it, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. She walked over to her kitchen counter and stared at the envelope, feeling as though it held the answers to questions she had been desperately asking. But there was also a fear of what she might find inside, and fear of the person who had just left it on her doorstep. She wasn't just digging into her family's past anymore. She was opening a door to something far more dangerous. Something that was coming for her. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah finally ripped open the envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in all caps. They were simple, but the meaning was clear: "You're next. You can't stop what's coming." Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the message again, the weight of the threat settling like a stone in her stomach. This wasn't just a warning. This was a promise. And it was aimed directly at her. A sudden noise outside the window made her jump. She rushed to the window, her heart racing, but when she looked, there was nothing. No shadow, no figure. Only the still, quiet night. But her mind wouldn't let it go. Someone was out there. Someone was watching. And then, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "We're closer than you think." Her pulse quickened. Sarah's world was spinning out of control. Everything she thought she understood about her family, about the people around her, even about herself, was being shattered, piece by piece. The letters, the threats, the strange man at her door. All of it felt like a warning, a calculated move to push her deeper into the unknown. But why her? What had she done to deserve this? And who was behind it all? She knew she had to keep going. There was no turning back now. But with every passing moment, Sarah could feel the danger creeping closer, could feel the darkness settling in around her. Someone was hunting her. And no matter how much she wanted to believe she could outrun it, she wasn't so sure anymore. The line between friend and foe was becoming dangerously blurred, and Sarah was starting to realize that the truth, whatever it was, might be too dangerous to uncover. Would she be able to survive long enough to find it? The darkness outside her window seemed to press closer. She wasn't alone anymore, and she had no idea who to trust. Just when Sarah thought the walls had closed in too tightly, just when the weight of the threats and unanswered questions seemed impossible to bear, something happened that flipped everything she knew on its head. The fear, the paranoia, the sleepless nights, they were all leading her to one undeniable truth: she had been wrong about the entire mystery. But it wasn't a simple twist or a minor revelation. No, this was something far darker, far more sinister than she had ever imagined. It came in the form of a phone call she never expected. It was late, far too late, and Sarah was already in bed, exhausted from the whirlwind of events over the past few days. She had tried to push the thoughts of the strange man at her door, the cryptic letters, and the looming threat of the unknown out of her mind, but it was impossible. It was like a heavy fog that clung to her every thought, suffocating her. The call came at 2:37 a.m., a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen before she answered. Sarah, the voice on the other end was low, unmistakably familiar, but with an edge of something cold. "We need to talk." It was Roy. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't show it. She knew he was involved, she just hadn't known how deeply. After all, he had always been her rock, the one person who had been there for her when the world seemed to spin out of control. He was the one who had guided her through the early stages of her investigation, offering advice, resources, even a shoulder to lean on. He had been the one who warned her about digging too deep, about not asking the wrong questions, but something had felt off about his warnings. Something that gnawed at her from the start. "Roy." Her voice was steady, though her mind was racing. "What do you mean, we need to talk? I don't have time for games anymore. Too much is happening." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Sarah wondered if she had lost the connection. Then, Roy's voice returned, but this time it was tinged with urgency and fear. "It's not what you think, Sarah. I'm not trying to protect you from your family's secrets. I'm trying to protect you from them." Her breath caught in her throat. Who's them, Roy?" The silence on the other end stretched longer than it should have. Roy didn't answer right away, and in that space of time, 1,000 thoughts swirled in Sarah's mind. Them. It wasn't a term that should have been used lightly, especially not after everything she had uncovered. She had always thought the danger was tied to her family's past, Clara's secrets, Emily's disappearance, the bizarre warnings. But now, Roy was telling her it was something much more dangerous. "I'm meeting you tomorrow," Roy finally said, his voice strained. "I'll explain everything then, but you need to understand something. You've been looking in the wrong direction." Who could she trust? The people closest to her seemed to be the ones hiding the most. Ava, who had been experiencing her own strange threats, was out of reach. She hadn't returned Sarah's calls since their last conversation. Roy, too, was evasive, his cryptic warnings ringing in her ears. Was he just trying to protect her, or was he involved in something darker? The fear that had been bubbling just beneath the surface began to overtake her as the evening approached. She tried to get some sleep, but it was impossible. Her mind raced, replaying every moment, every conversation, trying to connect the dots, but the more she tried, the more confusing and dangerous it all seemed. At one point, she thought she heard footsteps outside her bedroom window. Her heart pounded as she lay perfectly still, listening. Was it her imagination, or was someone out there, waiting for the right moment? Her breath was shallow as she tiptoed to the window, trying to peer out into the darkness. But when she looked, there was nothing, no shadow, no figure, just the empty street lit by the dim glow of the street lamp. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. She froze. Who could it be at this hour? Her heart thudded in her chest as she slowly approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. She hesitated for a moment, a deep sense of unease clawing at her, but she opened the door anyway. Standing on the other side was a man in his late 40s, a stranger to her. He wore a dark jacket and looked like he hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his expression strained. I know who you are," the man said in a hurried voice, his words almost stumbling over each other. "I know what you've been looking into. You need to stop. It's not safe for you anymore." Before Sarah could respond, he stepped closer, his hand shaking as he handed her an envelope, and then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night like a ghost. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, staring at the envelope in her hands. Her mind raced, but her instincts told her not to open it just yet. Something about the way the man had looked at her made her skin crawl, as if he knew something she didn't, something she wasn't supposed to know. With trembling fingers, she closed the door and locked it, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. She walked over to her kitchen counter and stared at the envelope, feeling as though it held the answers to questions she had been desperately asking. But there was also a fear of what she might find inside, and fear of the person who had just left it on her doorstep. She wasn't just digging into her family's past anymore. She was opening a door to something far more dangerous. Something that was coming for her. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah finally ripped open the envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in all caps. They were simple, but the meaning was clear: "You're next. You can't stop what's coming." Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the message again, the weight of the threat settling like a stone in her stomach. This wasn't just a warning. This was a promise. And it was aimed directly at her. A sudden noise outside the window made her jump. She rushed to the window, her heart racing, but when she looked, there was nothing. No shadow, no figure. Only the still, quiet night. But her mind wouldn't let it go. Someone was out there. Someone was watching. And then, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "We're closer than you think." Her pulse quickened. Sarah's world was spinning out of control. Everything she thought she understood about her family, about the people around her, even about herself, was being shattered, piece by piece. The letters, the threats, the strange man at her door. All of it felt like a warning, a calculated move to push her deeper into the unknown. But why her? What had she done to deserve this? And who was behind it all? She knew she had to keep going. There was no turning back now. But with every passing moment, Sarah could feel the danger creeping closer, could feel the darkness settling in around her. Someone was hunting her. And no matter how much she wanted to believe she could outrun it, she wasn't so sure anymore. The line between friend and foe was becoming dangerously blurred, and Sarah was starting to realize that the truth, whatever it was, might be too dangerous to uncover. Would she be able to survive long enough to find it? The darkness outside her window seemed to press closer. She wasn't alone anymore, and she had no idea who to trust. Just when Sarah thought the walls had closed in too tightly, just when the weight of the threats and unanswered questions seemed impossible to bear, something happened that flipped everything she knew on its head. The fear, the paranoia, the sleepless nights, they were all leading her to one undeniable truth: she had been wrong about the entire mystery. But it wasn't a simple twist or a minor revelation. No, this was something far darker, far more sinister than she had ever imagined. It came in the form of a phone call she never expected. It was late, far too late, and Sarah was already in bed, exhausted from the whirlwind of events over the past few days. She had tried to push the thoughts of the strange man at her door, the cryptic letters, and the looming threat of the unknown out of her mind, but it was impossible. It was like a heavy fog that clung to her every thought, suffocating her. The call came at 2:37 a.m., a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen before she answered. Sarah, the voice on the other end was low, unmistakably familiar, but with an edge of something cold. "We need to talk." It was Roy. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't show it. She knew he was involved, she just hadn't known how deeply. After all, he had always been her rock, the one person who had been there for her when the world seemed to spin out of control. He was the one who had guided her through the early stages of her investigation, offering advice, resources, even a shoulder to lean on. He had been the one who warned her about digging too deep, about not asking the wrong questions, but something had felt off about his warnings. Something that gnawed at her from the start. "Roy." Her voice was steady, though her mind was racing. "What do you mean, we need to talk? I don't have time for games anymore. Too much is happening." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Sarah wondered if she had lost the connection. Then, Roy's voice returned, but this time it was tinged with urgency and fear. "It's not what you think, Sarah. I'm not trying to protect you from your family's secrets. I'm trying to protect you from them." Her breath caught in her throat. "Who? Who's them, Roy? The silence on the other end stretched longer than it should have. Roy didn't answer right away, and in that space of time, 1,000 thoughts swirled in Sarah's mind. Them. It wasn't a term that should have been used lightly, especially not after everything she had uncovered. She had always thought the danger was tied to her family's past, Clara's secrets, Emily's disappearance, the bizarre warnings. But now, Roy was telling her it was something much more dangerous. "I'm meeting you tomorrow," Roy finally said, his voice strained. "I'll explain everything then, but you need to understand something. You've been looking in the wrong direction." Sarah's emotions were stretched thin, and her mind was teetering on the edge. She had never felt more isolated in her life. The people who were supposed to be her family, her allies, were now suspects. They were hiding something from her, and she was too deep into this web to back out now. But could she trust anyone? Was there even anyone left to trust? Then came the phone call. It was Ava. Sarah hadn't heard from her in days, and the silence between them had been deafening. She had tried to reach out, but Ava had always been one step ahead, not returning her calls or texts. The last conversation they had felt strained, and Sarah had sensed that something was wrong. But when the call came through that night, it wasn't the relief Sarah had hoped for. There was no apology, no reunion. Just a voice on the other end, full of tension, thick with fear. "I know what you've been digging into, Sarah," Ava said, her words clipped and urgent. "I know you're in danger. And I need you to stop. Now. I mean it. This isn't just about your family anymore. It's bigger than that. You're not going to like what you find if you keep going." Sarah's chest tightened. "What are you talking about? What do you know about all this?" "I don't have time for riddles, Ava. You've been avoiding me for days. What are you hiding?" Ava hesitated, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might hang up. But then came the words Sarah had feared hearing the most: "I don't have a choice. I've already said too much. I was never supposed to get involved. But now, there's no way out. They're watching all of us. I can't help you anymore. If you continue, they'll come for you." The finality in Ava's voice struck a chord deep inside Sarah. It wasn't the plea for help she'd expected. It was a warning, one laced with fear and desperation. And just like that, Sarah was faced with a choice that could shatter everything she thought she understood. Could she turn back? Should she? Or was there truly no escape from the darkness that had already seeped into her life? The following days were a blur. Sarah felt as if the walls were closing in on her, her world growing smaller and smaller with every decision she made. And then it happened. A letter, no stamp, just a simple note slipped under her door. The handwriting was familiar, though it was one she hadn't seen in years. It was from her mother. "Come to the house. We need to talk. It's time you know the truth. Your life is at stake now." Her hands shook as she read the note over and over. The letter was from the woman who had always been her protector, her mother, the one person she'd believed would never lie to her. But after everything that had happened, after everything she had learned about the twisted secrets in her family, Sarah was no longer sure of anything. This note could be the key to ending everything, or it could be the final step in a trap that would drag her deeper into the abyss. She had no idea who was playing her anymore, or what their endgame was. But one thing was clear: her mother's cryptic message was a choice that would determine her fate. The air felt thick with tension as Sarah stood outside her childhood home, staring up at the house she'd once loved. The windows were dark, the shutters closed tight. It didn't feel like home anymore, it felt like a monument to the lies and betrayals she'd uncovered. The same house where her mother had always assured her they were safe, that no one could harm them. But now, Sarah was walking into it knowing that the safety she had once taken for granted was gone. It wasn't just her family's past that she was up against anymore. It was everything. When she stepped inside, it was as if the house had been frozen in time. The familiar smell of jasmine and old books still hung in the air, but it was tainted now by the weight of secrets that had festered for years. She moved slowly through the hallway, the creak of the floorboards beneath her feet sounding unnaturally loud. Her heart raced, and her thoughts spiraled. Her mother was waiting for her, but why? What could she possibly say to explain everything that had happened? And if this was the truth, was it really worth learning? Would she ever be able to go back to the life she had before? She found her mother in the living room, sitting by the fireplace, as if waiting for her return. Her face was a mask of calm, but there was something in her eyes, a sadness, a resignation, that told Sarah this conversation would change everything. Sarah, her mother's voice was soft, but there was a hardness to it, a weight that hadn't been there before. I know you've been looking into the past. I know what you've found. And I need you to understand something. There's a reason I kept things from you. There's a reason I've never told you the full story. Sarah stepped closer, her throat tight. The truth. You've kept it from me, kept me in the dark. Why? What do you know that I don't? Why are you protecting them? Her mother's eyes filled with a mixture of regret and fear. Because there are things you don't understand, Sarah. People you don't know. And now, they're coming for us. They've been watching us for years, controlling everything, manipulating the past so that you would think it was just a family secret. But it's not. This goes deeper, much deeper than you ever could have imagined. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. But you could have told me. You should have told me. You let me go on believing I was doing the right thing. You let me put myself in danger. I was trying to protect you, her mother whispered, voice trembling. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know if telling you would make things worse. But now you've gone too far. And there's no turning back. They'll come for us both now. The words hit Sarah harder than anything she had ever heard. The people she thought she could trust, the family she had clung to her whole life, were now part of the very darkness she had been trying to escape. There was no easy way out. No escape. She was trapped between two terrifying choices: run and hide, or stay and confront the nightmare head-on. But her mother's final words made Sarah's blood run cold. If you want to survive, you have to make a choice, Sarah. You either stand with us, or you run. Standing there, facing the woman who had once been her protector, Sarah realized that the decision she made now would haunt her forever. The stakes had never been higher, and whatever choice she made, the truth would come with a cost. But which truth? And which side of this war was she truly on? Her mind raced, her heart heavy with the weight of everything she had learned. There was no way to know what would happen next. No way to be certain of anything anymore. All she could do now was choose. And whatever she decided, it was going to change everything. Sarah's mind was spinning, and as her mother's words hung in the air, the world around her seemed to shift, the walls closing in. Stand with us, or run. The weight of her choices felt like a crushing force, her chest tight with the realization that she was no longer in control of anything. She had thought the mystery was about family secrets, about uncovering the truth of her missing cousin, Emily. It was Ava, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. We have to leave. Now, she gasped, slamming the door shut behind her. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What's going on? She asked, her voice cracking. Ava was shaking, breathless. They know you're here. They're coming for you, Sarah. We don't have time to explain. You have to trust me. We have to get out, now. Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock on the front door, sharp and urgent. Her stomach twisted. She had known this moment was coming, the moment when everything she'd been running from would catch up to her, but hearing that knock made it real. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was happening. Ava grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the back door. We don't have much time. You have to listen to me, okay? I know what you've uncovered, and I know who's behind it. But you don't understand the full picture. Your family, they're just a small part of a much bigger operation. This goes way beyond them. Wait, Sarah's voice cracked, her pulse racing. What do you mean? Who's behind this? Who is this really about? Ava's face hardened, her grip tightening on Sarah's wrist. There are people you don't know, Sarah. People you've never met, but they've been controlling everything from the shadows. And it's not just your family's history they want. It's you, your connection to this whole mess. You've been chosen for something bigger than you realize. Suddenly, the door to the kitchen burst open. Two men, dressed in dark suits, appeared in the doorway, their eyes cold and calculating. They weren't just ordinary men, they were agents, professionals, and they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to take Sarah, and they would do anything to get her. Ava didn't hesitate. She shoved Sarah toward the back door with surprising force, her own body bracing for the impact of the men coming through the front. Go. Run. I'll hold them off. Sarah stumbled, barely catching her balance as she darted through the back door, her mind racing. She didn't know if Ava was really trying to protect her, or if she was leading her into an even darker trap. But at that moment, the only thing Sarah knew for certain was that if she stayed, she would be captured. The night air hit her like a slap as she sprinted down the alley behind the house, the sound of her footsteps pounding in her ears. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she ran faster than she ever had before. But as she turned the corner, she saw something that froze her in her tracks. Roy. He was standing there, right in front of her, his face cold and emotionless. He didn't even seem surprised to see her. Roy. Sarah whispered, the name barely escaping her lips. His eyes flickered for a moment, but he said nothing. Instead, he stepped forward, blocking her path, his hand outstretched in a warning. You don't know what you're doing, Sarah. You don't understand the consequences of your actions. No, Sarah said, taking a step back. No more lies. What's going on, Roy? Who are you working for? What do they want from me? For a long moment, Roy didn't answer. His gaze shifted, almost as if he was considering his next move. But then, with a heavy sigh, he lowered his hand, his voice soft but steady. It's bigger than you know. Bigger than you could ever imagine. I didn't want to be involved in this, but there's no turning back now. You've uncovered something you weren't supposed to see, and now they'll stop at nothing to make sure you never speak about it again. Sarah's heart raced. Who are they? Who's behind all of this? Roy's expression tightened, and for the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. You're in the middle of something you can't control. You need to go. You need to disappear, or they'll find you. Roy, you're not making any sense. Sarah cried, her voice breaking. I need the truth. I need to know what's really going on. He took a step closer to her, his voice dropping to a whisper. You've already uncovered it, Sarah. The letters. The family secrets. The missing cousin. It's all connected. But the real truth isn't about Emily. It's about you. Your bloodline. The family's ties to a powerful network, people who've been pulling the strings for generations. And now they want you. Her mind reeled. Me? Why? Because you're the key, Roy said, his voice hoarse with urgency. Your family's connection to the past, it's not just about heritage. It's about power. And they, whoever they are, believe you can unlock something. Something that could change everything. Just then, the sharp sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation. More men, and this time, they weren't agents. They were thugs, mercenaries, with guns in hand, closing in on Sarah and Roy from both sides. Sarah's pulse spiked. She was trapped. Run, Roy hissed, his face tense. Get out of here. I'll hold them off. But Sarah began, but before she could protest, Roy turned and pushed her into the street, his voice a low, urgent command. Go. Now. She didn't have a choice. Turning on her heel, Sarah ran again, this time with more fear in her chest than ever before. The world around her was unraveling, and she didn't know who to trust or how to escape. The conspiracy wasn't just about her family, her missing cousin, or the mysterious letters anymore. It was about something far bigger, and if she couldn't figure it out, if she couldn't find a way to stop them, there might not be a world left to save. As she ran through the streets, adrenaline coursing through her veins, the sound of pursuit grew louder. She didn't know if anyone was on her side anymore. She didn't know if there was a way out. But the one thing she did know was that the truth she was chasing wasn't just dangerous, it was deadly. Sarah's chest pounded as she ran, the city lights blurring around her like a storm of color. Her breaths were ragged, her legs burning with every step, but she couldn't slow down. The sounds of heavy footsteps behind her were growing louder, and she knew there was no way she could outrun them, not forever. The men, the ones chasing her, they weren't just trying to stop her from uncovering the truth. No. They were hunting her. The weight of that realization hung over her like a shadow, dark and suffocating. Every twist, every turn, had led her to this moment, and she could feel it in her bones. The end was coming. But what would it look like? Would it be the men with guns closing in on her, Or would it be something far worse, an enemy far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated? As Sarah sprinted down an alley, her heart racing with panic, she caught sight of a familiar face in the distance. Roy. He was standing there, alone, waiting. She skidded to a halt, her breath catching in her throat. Was he trying to help her again, or was this another trap? She didn't know who to trust anymore, but she couldn't afford to stop. She couldn't afford to hesitate. Roy, she shouted, hoping he could hear her. You said you'd help me. What is all of this? Who's behind this? Who am I running from? Roy's expression was unreadable as he stepped forward. You don't get it, Sarah, he said, his voice calm, but there was a flicker of something darker in his eyes, fear. Guilt. It was never just about you. It was about all of us. About your family, your bloodline. But you're not the only one they've been watching. Sarah's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice shaking. He paused, as if considering whether to tell her the truth, and then he did something she wasn't prepared for. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and handed it to her. Sarah took it with trembling hands, her fingers fumbling as she opened it. The note was simple, just a name, scrawled in an unfamiliar handwriting, Ava Matthews. Ava. Sarah repeated, confusion washing over her. What does she have to do with any of this? Roy's face twisted, a mix of regret and anger flashing across his features. Ava's not who she says she is. She's been playing both sides, working against you from the start. She's been using you, manipulating you to get what they want. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. No, that can't be true, she whispered. Ava, she was my friend. She warned me. She told me to run. Roy's lips curled into a grimace. That's exactly what she wanted you to think. She's been feeding you lies this whole time. She's part of the network, Sarah. She's one of them. Before Sarah could process what Roy had just revealed, a new voice rang out from behind her. You should have listened to Roy. It was Ava. But she wasn't the same Ava Sarah had known. Her face was hard, her eyes cold and calculating as she stepped into the alley, flanked by two armed men. Sarah froze, her heart crashing in her chest. Ava, no, please, why? Ava's smile was chilling. You're so naive, Sarah. You think this is about family secrets, about missing cousins? It's bigger than that. Much bigger. I've been trying to protect you from the truth, but you insisted on digging. And now, look where it's gotten you. The weight of her words hit Sarah like a wave. Protect me from the truth. How could Ava, someone who had seemed so close to her, be involved in this? It didn't make sense. But as Sarah's mind raced to piece together the puzzle, something clicked. Ava was never trying to help her, she was keeping her in the dark. Keeping her controlled. You're working for them, Sarah whispered, the realization sinking in. Who are they, Ava? Who do you work for? Ava's eyes narrowed. I don't have to tell you anything. You'll understand soon enough. You were never supposed to get this far. But now that you have, she shrugged, her smile widening. I guess it's time for the final act. At that moment, everything changed. The alley seemed to close in around Sarah, the walls pressing in like a vice. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Her body screamed for her to move, but her legs were frozen. The adrenaline that had propelled her this far was now faltering, fading into a haze of exhaustion and fear. Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the air, gunshots, sharp and unmistakable. Ava's two men fell to the ground, their bodies crumpling in an instant. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat as she turned toward the source of the shots. And there, standing in the shadows, was Roy. His gun still smoking. Ava, Roy said, his voice steady but tinged with something Sarah couldn't quite place. I told you this would end badly. But I didn't think it'd come to this. Ava's expression faltered for a fraction of a second before her mask of calm slipped back into place. You're making a mistake, Roy, she said, her voice hardening. You don't understand what you're up against. You don't know who's really in control. Roy didn't flinch. I know exactly who's in control. And it's not you. The tension was unbearable. Every second stretched out like an eternity. Sarah could feel her pulse racing as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. But before she could make sense of it all, a new figure stepped into the alley from the other side. It was her mother. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Mom!" Her mother's eyes were empty, devoid of any warmth, and for the first time, Sarah saw something in her that she had never wanted to acknowledge: betrayal. "I'm sorry, Sarah," her mother said, her voice thick with regret. "But it's too late now. I never wanted you to be part of this, but I had no choice. You were always going to be involved. They've been watching you. They've been watching all of us." Sarah's world spun, the ground beneath her seeming to tremble as the truth slammed into her with the force of a tidal wave. Her mother, the person she had trusted most, was part of the conspiracy, part of the network that had orchestrated everything: the lies, the manipulation, the endless web of secrets. "Why?" Sarah choked out, her voice raw with emotion. "Why didn't you protect me? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Her mother's eyes softened, but her words were cold. "Because I was trying to protect you from them. I was trying to protect you from what you would become. But now you're too deep. And they're coming for you, Sarah. You can't escape this." Ava stepped forward, her face tight with frustration. "You see, Sarah? There's no way out. There never was." But Sarah, her heart pounding in her chest, finally understood. She wasn't just a victim in this story. She was the key, the final piece in a puzzle that no one could have predicted. The letters, the missing cousin, the threats, the betrayal, it all led to this moment. The conspiracy had been manipulating everything from the beginning, and now it was her turn to make a choice. Without another word, Sarah grabbed the gun from the fallen mercenary and pointed it directly at Ava. "No," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not your pawn anymore." The room fell silent. Ava's eyes widened in shock, but it was too late. The twist no one saw coming had already happened. Sarah wasn't going to run anymore. She wasn't going to hide. The game had changed, and for the first time, she was the one in control. In that final, breathless moment, the world around her seemed to stop. All the questions, all the pain, the fear, it came to a head. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was fighting for her future. And whatever happened next, she was going to make sure it was her choice. The gun trembled in Sarah's hand, but she stood her ground, eyes locked on Ava, her mother standing silently behind her. The finality of the moment was suffocating, and for the first time, Sarah felt the weight of everything that had happened: the lies, the betrayal, the family secrets, pressing in on her from all sides. She could hear her heart pounding in her chest, a constant reminder of how far she'd come and how much she had lost along the way. But in this moment, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't the same girl who had stumbled into this nightmare. She was someone different now, someone who understood the truth. And with that understanding came a kind of power. She didn't need to play their game anymore. Ava, though, didn't seem afraid. There was something cold and calculating in her gaze, the same look Sarah had seen in the shadows of the men chasing her, the same look in the eyes of the people who had controlled this entire twisted web. Ava's lips curled into a bitter smile, as if she had already decided how this would play out. "You think you've won?" Ava asked, her voice sharp and edged with bitterness. "This was never about you. You were just a tool. And you're still just a tool." Sarah's grip tightened on the gun, but her voice came out calm. "I'm not a tool anymore, Ava. I'm not your pawn. And I'm not going to let you use me or anyone else again." For a long, tense moment, the alley was silent, filled with nothing but the distant hum of the city and the weight of decisions that had already been made. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ava stepped back, her hands slowly rising in a gesture of surrender. "You've got no idea what you're doing, Sarah," she said softly, as if her words were meant to be a warning. "You think taking me down will fix things, but it won't. The truth is bigger than you. It always has been." Sarah didn't respond. She wasn't listening to Ava anymore. She had already made up her mind. The weight in her hand felt lighter, the tension in her body slowly unwinding as she lowered the gun. Ava had been right about one thing: this wasn't just about her. It was about everything they had built, everything they had stolen. It was about the people who controlled the secrets, the ones who profited from the lies, and the countless lives that had been shattered along the way. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about breaking the cycle. It was about taking back control. With one final look at Ava, Sarah turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the alley. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The path ahead was uncertain, and the world she had known was gone, replaced by something darker and more dangerous. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had faced the truth and survived. That was all that mattered now. Her mother didn't follow her. Sarah could feel her eyes on her back as she walked away, but there was no turning around this time. There was nothing left for her there. She had to let go of the past, to let go of the people who had brought her into this nightmare. The choices she made now would define her future, and she couldn't afford to carry the weight of their mistakes any longer. As Sarah walked through the city, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something she was missing. The letters, the strange symbols, the connections that hadn't fully made sense, they lingered in her mind, teasing her with the promise of answers. But she wasn't chasing those answers anymore. She didn't need to. What mattered now was her own life, her own future, and the choices she would make moving forward. But even as she walked away, there was something in the back of her mind that wouldn't let go. A nagging feeling, a whisper that told her the conspiracy wasn't over. Not really. The people behind this, the ones who had played her family like pawns, they were still out there. And though she had taken a step away from the darkness, it would always be with her. The truth had been uncovered, but it wasn't as simple as the people she had confronted. There were other players, other forces at work that Sarah couldn't even begin to understand. As she reached the corner of the street, she glanced up at the stars, their distant light flickering like memories she couldn't quite reach. And for the briefest moment, she wondered, how much of the story had she really uncovered? Had she really put an end to everything, or had she only peeled back the first layer? The answers were still out there, still hidden beneath the surface. But then, a voice echoed in her mind, her mother's voice, soft and almost imperceptible. You can't run from this, Sarah. You can't outrun the truth. And with that, she understood. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sarah took one last look at the darkened streets ahead, her resolve hardening. Whatever was left of the conspiracy, whatever secrets still lingered in the shadows, she would face them. She wasn't running anymore. And no matter how deep the mystery went, she would find the answers, even if it meant uncovering a truth far more terrifying than she had ever imagined. The camera lingered on her figure, disappearing into the night, as the city seemed to breathe with a quiet, uneasy promise. The end of one story was always the beginning of another. And Sarah was ready to step into it.